Welcome to Permission to Shine, the space where high-achieving women like you come to peel back the layers, overcome what's been holding you back, and rise into your most authentic, powerful self. I'm your host, Sharice Bisram, inner power activation leader and intuitive healer, and a woman who knows what it means to look like she's thriving on the outside, also while feeling disconnected on the inside. This podcast is here to remind you, you didn't come here to just perform, you came here to lead with your soul. Your obstacles, they're invitations to expand. And your power, it was never outside of you. It's been waiting within you all along. Each week we'll dive into honest conversations, healing insight and soul-led strategies to help you stop self-sabotaging, reclaim your light and lead your life, your business and your relationships from deep-rooted truth. So if you're ready to rise with grace, softness and fire, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode. Now we are near 100 episodes. I think this is episode 99. So how incredible is that? And I have another guest from overseas. And what's really amazing about this podcast, it's been able to connect people from all over the world. So when I'm bringing you guests, these guests have approached me because they want to share their story on this podcast and this platform. And today's guest, I said to her before I hit record that I don't know too much about her. And I think that's really beautiful that, you know, she felt an alignment to jump on this show and to tell you her story. So I'm learning with you. And I think that's always the most beautiful space to be in. So I am going to welcome to you, Nancy Griffin.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I was going to say good morning, but of course, we just say hello because you're right. We're here from all over the world, which is amazing. And the other thing that I've been most impressed with this process is however we get connected, we go straight to the sweet spot. Like immediately we're connected with the essence of who we are and what we do with you and who you are and what you do. So it's my pleasure to be connected.
Amazing. Yeah. So Nancy, for anyone that obviously doesn't know you, do you want to tell everyone what you do, where you are in the world?
I live in Canada and I live very close to, I live between Toronto and Montreal. I live sort of in the country. It's kind of like the Hamptons, if you know, out of New York. It was a hard scrabble area, and then somebody decided to open a winery, and now I think we've got 98 wineries. So 3 hours from Toronto, it's a destination, and it's just a beautiful area. It's beautiful geographically, but also the people who are here are fabulous. My business is Women, Worth, and Wellness. And I started this whole brand when I was a wealth advisor. I was a wealth advisor in 1992. And when you're a wealth advisor, you work for a company, but you've got to go build your own business. So you're very much an entrepreneur. And so I decided I was going to focus on women and their whole wealth scenario. But no sooner did I get started than you start to meet with women, and they're in couples. It wasn't exclusively women. You realize they've got a disproportionate amount of responsibility for their family's health and wellness. Normally, we think of the husband or the man in the house to focus on investing, and women, of course, are expected to do everything else. So that's when I started to focus on women's health and bringing different not-for-profit health-related organizations focusing on women's health to their attention. And so health became the first priority, with wealth following. And as a wealth advisor, you find a way to put the two of them together. We know that if you don't have your health, doesn't matter how much money you've got. And so health really is the AAA1 priority for starters.
No, I resonate with this so deeply. And I actually think that a lot of the women that I know that have built really successful businesses and all of these things that are really high up have actually had quite a lot of health issues as a result of living in burnout for so long. I don't know if you've had the same experience.
Exactly. And no, you can't do that because when it's really severe, it is literally a showstopper. And, you know, we take our health for granted. We get up in the morning and we expect to just go, 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 go. And you don't really pay attention and invest in yourself until something cripples you. and
Mm,
says, wait a minute, this is not right. So what I
yeah.
try to do is help people how you can offset that in advance, not being a medical practitioner, just saying don't take your health for granted.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd love to know kind of like how you've navigated that space for yourself within that. Because obviously you're learning as you're doing the job, I can imagine, and you've been doing it all those years. But how was your journey through that for your own health and all of the things?
Well, you get stronger as you go along because you meet more people. And certainly if you're in the position of giving advice, you better have your own act in order to a certain extent. I mean, nobody's perfect by any means, but sometimes simple little things that have been game savers for you are little things that you can share. And whatever it is, what is a treat for you? I think spa days are terrific. I think having good friends are really important, but you want to have the right friend because sometimes, friends change as their worlds change, and you never want to be accessing things that are downers. So you need to always be conscious of what you're doing and who you're doing it with and how you're doing it and what you're learning as a result of it. So it's just a continual process of being very, very aware.
Mm. And that level of awareness that you've had within this job role, and like you said, it's got stronger every time. Would you say before that you did this job that you had that level of awareness already, or was that something that you've developed as you went along?
No, something I developed as I went along. I think you've got a core value system based on your upbringing until you get into the working world. But when I started in the wealth advisory business, I was recruited into it. And when I was there, I was sorry I hadn't been there 20 years earlier because it just is such a great, great, great business. But my first manager, I think of him often because he said, Nancy, okay, we're going to teach you how to do the job because there are lots of different aspects to this role that you need to learn and you need to understand. But he said, I can tell you, whoever you're tracking after as a prospect is not who will become your client. He said at all times you have to be 360 aware of what is going on because he said out of the blue, somebody will say, I understand you're in the investment business. I'd really like to know. Tell me more about you and what you do. And it's kind of like, what? So that was a really, really powerful piece of advice because you can apply that in so many situations and circumstances to constantly be aware of what in the world is going on around you, not just what's in front of you.
That's so important. And you know what's funny? I have a saying that's similar to that, and it's stay ready so you don't have to get ready.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
Yeah,
Spot
because
on.
yeah, I feel like that's always been my life's journey actually. I feel like even when I was a dancer all those years, I've always kept myself up to par. Like I never really and this was obviously quite toxic at times, not resting too much because I wanted to always be on top form in case, like you said, someone out of nowhere said, I need a dancer right now. Can you get to London in
Good for
like an
you.
hour? You know, but again, that came with implications in terms of like how much I pushed myself and how hard I was on myself. And I think now in my life, running my business, there's definitely more of a awareness of what my body can take and what my mind can take and all those
Right.
things. And I think that does come with this, like we said, this layer of deep awareness. Like, what do I actually need now? And asking myself that at any moment when I'm feeling a bit run down or a bit tired, I'm like, am I resting enough at the moment? Or do I feel like I want to do that thing? I think so many people don't realize they have so much more power than they think over their own life and their own reality. And I'd love to know for you, um, in this work and all the years you've been doing it, what would be the most common sort of health issue that you see with women or common like hole they get themselves into in the work that you do?
Well, what you've just said is absolutely spot on because, and I think that's wisdom. The older you get, the more experiences you've had, and the wiser you become and how you can be your best. And the best way to be your best is to continually talk to yourself. Like, what do you want now? How do you feel? And then adjust accordingly. But what I've seen a lot of, and I've done different events on this whole issue, is women having so much capacity for more, but not stepping up to that more. They're kind of
Mm,
holding back. They're kind of waiting to be invited. And it's like, no, no, no. The world needs more women in leadership roles doing wonderful things. And so it can be a negative, but it's also a positive in that they are so capable and have achieved so much. And my attitude is keep going. You're not there yet.
I love all of what you just said then. And the way you articulated the wisdom piece was so important
Right,
because I often talk about how, some people say wise with age, but I like how you said wise from experience. And then the
right.
older you get, the more experiences you're having.
Mhm.
But that doesn't automatically make you wise. It's your choice in how you observe that lesson to whether you actually become wise from it. Otherwise, I know so many people, and especially women, that are perpetuating the same cycles over and over again, not learning the lesson, right? So I think
Exactly.
that was so important that you said there. And I absolutely agree with Bells on about more women in leadership positions because it's
Well,
almost like, what you said about at the beginning when you said about women investing and all those things, that their power is given to the masculine and they're not owning that for themselves. And I really am such an advocate for the fact that I believe women are better leaders than men
right.
because we're more compassionate, we're more understanding, we care genuinely and genuinely about the individual. And so we care about the collective. And I always talk about how the patriarchal's like a triangle, but the matriarchal's a circle. And I think that when one woman wins and we're leading from our feminine energy, all
Right.
women win because we're
Correct.
all helping each other. And I'd love for you to kind of expand on your experience of that for yourself.
Well, the two qualities that I value most in people that I interact with are generosity and a sense of humor. And I really, really encourage people to be generous. Be generous in small ways, but also be generous in big ways. Sometimes women aren't always generous towards others.
Mm,
And I think it's such a shame because if you see an opportunity that is ideal for somebody else, why not? Why not promote that person or connect that person and help that become a reality? I think I'd love to meet an amazing, maybe you'll run into somebody, an amazing sociologist who can tell us the differences between physiologically between men and women
mm,
because men are more part of a tribe. Women really kind of are, I think in human evolution, you always want to be the prettiest one who's going to be chosen first. So therefore, other women can be your competition. Well, you know what? There's enough in the world for us all. Never mind the competition. Forget it. Let's make it happen for everybody we possibly can because, to your point, the more women we have leading the way, the better the world will be for everybody.
No, and you know what I think you've described there, Nancy, is actually the patriarchal impact it's had on women. Because if you think about the generations before, like ancestral level, women used to go to tents and they'd just stay all together in tent, and then all their cycles would sync, and they would call it the
Yes,
red tent because of obviously the fact that they would all have their menstrual cycles together. So I believe that when I think it was the Second World War, when that came up and women could fight, that was kind of the start of this inkling of the patriarchy starting to sink in. And I feel like the patriarchy turned on women because they could see the full potential of women power and
yes,
decided that actually, if they set this rule that women compete with each other, it means they're not competing with men because they're competing against
yes.
each
Yeah,
other.
good
So it's,
point. Good point.
yeah. So I almost feel like that is kind of where the Western world has switched it up because there's still like tribes in different parts of the world where there's women chiefs and there's women leading the pack and all of that stuff. And actually in the animal kingdom, right, the female lions are the ones that go to hunt. So,
Right.
we're shown in nature all the time, aren't we? The fact that women are so sacred and, this connection to one another is so important. And that's what I think for me now, surrounding yourself, like you said at the beginning, with like-minded women, friends, people that you can talk to and connect with as women is so important, and it is so important for men as well. I'm not taking that away. I do believe that, but I think that in order for women to really fully own their power, you need to be supported by other women that feel the same way, because there's no
Correct.
way you can succeed as a
Right.
woman if you don't have other women there cheering you on. Because as we probably know, I don't know if you found for yourself, but I found that sometimes on the journey of leadership, it can be a little bit lonely. So I think if you've got
Yes.
people, first of all, yourself cheering you on, but a tribe of women that are, saying to you, this is what you're supposed to be doing, this is where you're supposed to be, this is important, they want to listen. I think that in itself is just beautiful. And sometimes you don't get that, by the way, as well. I'm talking about an ideal world here, but I know a lot of listeners that maybe are starting out in their journey might be thinking, I've got no one like that around me. But trust
Right.
me, when
Right.
you take that mic and you step on stage, they will come, and that's exactly it. And I'm sure that's a Bible verse somewhere as well about how, you make the stage for yourself, or you step forward and then people will come as a result.
But that's there are two aspects. One is courage to put yourself out there to begin with. And then you're absolutely right. That often attracts other like-minded people. And once you, I mean, you know what it's like when you get into a group and, the ideas are just flowing and people are championing one another. It's a whole different scenario than somebody arriving and, taking all the airtime, taking all that. It's like, enough.
Mm.
Is this meeting over yet? No, lots of different dynamics, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's really probably one of the reasons why I started the podcast as well, because I wanted more people to hear other people's stories of overcoming and finding success or finding their way out of darkness, so people can have access to this knowing that, no matter what you've gone through in your life, you can make something of yourself, or, get to a place you want to be. And I think that, communication for me has been like my biggest set of freedom, because I think I trapped myself in my own thoughts and emotions for so long because I was so afraid of being vulnerable, that now
Yeah,
it's
that's
so
right.
important, and opening up to having interviews with, people from all over the world is so important, because I find that, especially my guests that come onto the show, there's always a golden thread that connects us all, a reason why we do what we do. Maybe it's for we're passionate about women, or maybe we've got our own story overcoming. There's just like a beautiful thing there. And I think that, just from speaking to you, I've already felt that that's also what you
Mhm.
stand for.
Right. No, I think it's amazing. This is a whole new adventure for me. And without exception, every woman and actually one man, no, two men that I've connected with, it's like you just have the most amazing conversations because you're just
Mm,
bouncing back and forth and reinforcing and going, oh my goodness, that's incredible. So it's
yeah.
terrific, really terrific, very positive.
Absolutely. And I think that's a plus side to this digital
Right.
age now, right? As we're connecting with more people. And that's where we can use our wisdom for good, which hopefully is what
Exactly.
people are getting from that. So, obviously, my podcast is called Permission to Shine. I'd love to know in your life when you really felt like was your moment that you gave yourself that full permission.
Full permission, full permission, full permission. Probably when my first career was at Procter and Gamble, and that was just when women were getting into management. So it was a completely different scenario. And you did your job well, but you didn't take a lot of risks. And finally, the glass ceiling kicked in for me, and I just thought, life is too short to put up with this or other thing. And I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so when I would try to leave the company with an entrepreneurial idea, you'd get talked right back into staying. They'd
Mm.
give you a promotion or they'd give you more salary or whatever. And finally, you just bust out. And this happened recently to this other woman that I was talking to. It's like, oh my goodness, I've always been surrounded with this framework, a regular income, regular order of business. And now I'm an entrepreneur. And it's almost like you don't have the wind beneath your sails until you establish that new reality and you've got a
Mm.
parachute. So I think probably the time when I left Procter and Gamble and ran politically, which was a big leap,
Oh, wow.
when I resigned and people heard what I was doing, it's like, you're going to do what? Because it was going into a completely different world. But once you get out there, you get your wings going and you do your flapping and focusing and one thing leads to another. And really, well, that probably was one of the major turning points.
Yeah, I love that so much. So tell me more about that running politics and all of that stuff. I
Well,
want to hear
it
more.
was an interesting scenario because when I was at Procter and Gamble, we have one daughter, so you're, doing your job and running your home and, looking after your child, but you basically minded your own business. I'd done a little bit of volunteer work with the Cancer Society, but beyond that, nothing in the community. And out of the blue, our next door neighbor invited me to go on to the community services board. And that was in November. January, we had this incident where this person escaped, this really severe criminal, escaped from a halfway house, which is, a rehabilitation,
Yeah.
and murdered this woman who was the buyer of the women's clothing store where I'd bought all my little suits.
Oh
And so they
no.
said, well, Nancy, you're in charge of community engagement. It's like, oh my God. So now I'm the spokesperson. And so the lessons that I had learned at Procter and Gamble were the lessons that I used as a leader. Because what
Mm.
it was this facility was a federal facility. The police department was right around the corner. They didn't know that this person was there. So it was a matter of who's in charge. And basically, the approach I took as a leader in the community was to say, we're all in charge. Like you can't point the finger to any one level of government and say it's all their fault. And so coming out of that was all sorts of things, that I headed right into a huge hornet's nest. But once you're in there, you meet all sorts of new people, you get all sorts of new ideas, and was invited to be a guest speaker with the Solicitor General's annual gathering of all the prison wardens, if you can imagine. I still remember being in the washroom, and this little lady was in there with a white suit on and a pink shirt, and she was the warden of one of the most severe institutions. So it's like, all of a sudden you're meeting a lot of new people and different people. And so that was the main reason why I ran. I knew I wouldn't win, but I really, really wanted the community to know what in the world is going on because everybody's life is busy. How do you really know what's going on? And
Mm.
so then coming out of that, of course, one thing leads to another and leads to another. So, I could have stayed there and retired from Procter and Gamble and had a big pension and but why? I mean, you've only got one life. So are you really doing what you want to do? Are you really happy where you are right now? And often you've got to just take that leap of faith and a risk and all the comments that are going to come your way about why in the world are you doing this? But it's your life. So go for it.
Yes, 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 yes. I'm gonna
Right.
praise you because I think that especially, I mean, what year was this that this all happened as
That
well?
was 1988.
Yes.
1988.
So I guess you're probably coming up in this space where the world is changing, and
Right.
everything's moving so fast paced. So the fact that you as a woman was like, right, I'm gonna stand up
Mm.
and say what I gotta say. It's like
I-
you really were liberating more women as a
mhm.
result of just saying, oh, well, I've got to do this. And I guess that for me sounds like what happened was there was like an inner knowing in yourself that was like, no, I have to do this. And I think that
Right.
that is so powerful because so many women I know and I speak to say to me, oh, I had this feeling and then I ignored it, or I knew I
I'm
needed to
not
do it but
worthy.
haven't. Yeah, right. But again, it's this pressure, and we've seen it, and it's ingrained and inherited as well sometimes, right? That people's grandparents are like, oh no, no, you just women are seen and not heard, and all of those
No.
things. And actually, the fact that you were like, no, I'm going to do this, and the impact that probably would have had on the lives of all the women that knew you to be like, wow, she's doing it, so I can do something similar, or I can at least say no when I don't want to do something anymore. Like that's so powerful.
But let me tell you one other thing that happened. People were not expecting me to be a candidate. And the lady who did win was people who many people knew of her. And then there was another man who ran. So the three of us. Anyway, there I am, out of the chute. I worked for about a month and a half to put the speech together because I knew that would be really, really important. Like you wanted to do this, so you better be impressive because you're only going to get one opportunity to do this well. Anyway, this one lady who ended up being a chancellor of a university, she went, oh my goodness, you're so impressive. And well, like, in other words, where did you come from? But you know what she didn't do? Was pick me up and say, Nancy, let me help you. Like,
Mm.
really, you have potential to be a politician if this is where you're starting. And so that's my point about championing other women. When
Yeah.
you've got that power that you can direct, you can connect, you can influence, then do it. Make that difference. And it would have made all the difference in the world, but it didn't happen. I still remember.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I see that a lot in the business space, actually, still to this day, women in business, that some women are such advocates of other women and they'll
Right.
pass on your connections and links. And
Yeah.
I'm a person that likes to do that because I just think that if I meet someone that's like, oh, I really need someone that does human design, I know exactly who I'm going to connect them with. And I'm like, oh, and even the podcast, I get random people message me saying, oh, I really want to speak to that person. Do you have their link? And I'll
Yes.
send it across for that reason. But I've also been met with the other, and in the dance industry, especially, that was just the way it was, and there's so much jealousy around each other and again our not enoughness that
Right.
leads the way, unfortunately, and that is all of the ego stuff. So now I try to be the example that I want to see by leading
Right.
the way, in
Exactly.
that for myself. So
Exactly.
yeah, I'm so there with you. So for
Yeah.
anyone that is listening right now and maybe they've spent some time thinking about like, what the next steps are but haven't moved yet, what would be like some three key things that you would say to that woman listening right now?
Well, you and I mentioned this earlier. You got to spend a lot of time talking to yourself. And, if you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's your life. It is your life. So really, what have you enjoyed? What haven't you liked? What would you like to have more of? What else would you like to be doing? And then, of course, access other resources, but be careful because sometimes people who are giving you advice are not the right ones for you to be getting advice from. So I think you have to be really, really careful because, at this point, you're kind of vulnerable. It was like me when I was at Procter and Gamble wanting to be an entrepreneur and talked right back into staying. This executive did not have an entrepreneurial bone in his body. So, of course, what I wanted to do was completely foreign to him. So, all I'm saying is really, really, really be careful who you're getting advice from. So, in other words, you have to be smart. It's smart evolution that's happening with your life. But talk to yourself, do some reading. I think that, it's really, really powerful when you think about what you really like to do and what you're really good at, and maybe capture some of the comments that people have made about you or made to you about, oh, you're always really great at whatever. Like,
Mm.
don't treat that comment casually because that's the essence of who you are, that somebody else is recognizing as being very positive.
Yeah, absolutely. That I always say about doing a positive case study. So, like for so many people that, have a limiting belief or, low self-worth, they've lived their life with a low case study, all the things that
Right.
gone wrong or all the
Yeah.
mistakes. Whereas actually, like you said, if you're taking note of all the times that someone's told you you're great at something, or, even if it's down to like your body image is something you're not confident with, but you're remembering all the times where someone told you you look nice or whatever, it's like
Right.
this case study of remembering what all the great traits. So then if you are ever feeling any doubt, you're like, no, 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 I know. And actually, more than anything, we're saying that that is to help you build your sense of self-worth, but
Sure.
ultimately the conversations that you have with yourself are the ones that are going to build that ultimately, aren't they? So I guess all of that feeds into that self-awareness again, which we said at the beginning, which I think is so important. And also I want to add to that about when you said don't take advice from everyone, like that's so important. And I think
Right.
that we're in this generation where you'll tell someone something and they naturally give you advice, even though you haven't asked for it. And I was definitely that person before I, began my own healing journey. And even midway through, I think you kind of get excited, don't you? Because you learn all these new things, you want to tell everyone about it, and you're like, oh,
Right.
how about you do all
Right.
of this? But then I hit a point where I was like, you know what? I'm not here to save anyone. So I think
No.
now my kind of natural question is, do you want to just share this story or would you like advice? So then I'm at least I'm coming in with that openness instead of giving it unwillingly, right? And now that that's
Right.
also my job to give advice, I now am more conscious of that for myself. But there's also this saying, isn't there, that if you want to be a millionaire, for example, surround yourself with other millionaires. And if you're
Correct.
the fifth
Correct.
member of a group and all four
Yep.
people are millionaires, it's inevitable that you will become one too, because you are the five people you spend the most time with. So I definitely think that if you're in a space right now where, no one around you is doing the thing that you want to do, look, I mean, there's so many groups online now
Well,
where you can
exactly.
find, the people in there. Like I'm part of a massive group of like successful business women, and they're always sharing their wins in there, and the problems that they face, and it's so refreshing to be surrounded by women that are doing that. But equally, the women in my life, my friends and all those things, are great women, because again, I've grown and evolved and they've grown with me, or they've met me where I'm at now, and it's really, really wonderful. And you have to be discerning and also really protective of your energy. Like,
Correct.
we're not available for everyone all the time. And I think for
No,
women,
no.
that's such a hard thing, isn't it, to sometimes
Yeah.
grasp?
Well, you need to be your own best agent
Mm,
because, there's so much coming at everybody every day. And, staying on the positive side is really, really, really important. Then also finding your special tribe or tribes. I think the UK was the first country to identify loneliness as a disease. And so don't withdraw. Like find your
mm.
tribe, get out there and do stuff. You're absolutely right. All sorts of different groups that you can be part of.
Yeah, and I also think with the loneliness part, because I definitely felt that myself as I was changing in terms of like who I used to be to who I became now, that you will find what you look for. So if you're
Yes,
looking for more people that are like you will find them. But if you're telling
right.
yourself over and over again you're not going to find them, you won't. So
No.
again, the way you talk to yourself is the absolute key. I'd love to know, Nancy, in your experience, because obviously we're talking about the wisdom we've gained and like, the overcoming and all those things. But I'd love to know something that, maybe an obstacle that has come up in your life a few times that you've had to work through over and over again. Like what does that look like for you in your life?
Well, I have two older sisters. One's 12 years older and the other's 6 years older. And our mother was quite a feminist, whereas the one that's 12 years older, she will gladly tell you she is not a feminist. Not a feminist. And when she wants to talk about it, she always crosses her arms and she loves to take me on. Well, over the years, it's been like oil and water. Like we have not gotten along. And she's very sarcastic. If we saw one another, whatever infrequently that was, she'd say, "And how's the little overachiever today?" Like just trying to push you down every step of the way. So, over the years, I've basically stayed out of her way because it's going to be difficult. But as she ages, she's becoming more mellow and more appreciative and more complimentary towards me, which is incredible. And this has happened over a very long period of time. This has happened over like 40 years. But at this point in time, it's nice to see how that relationship is changing and evolving for the better, and that it's happening before, somebody isn't around anymore.
Oh,
So
I love
it's kind
that.
of like watching a TV series. It's,
Yeah.
ongoing, but it's so, so, so interesting. For Mother's Day, I posted this article that this research hospital in Toronto had written about me. And it was basically, I was basically saying that I got into the investment business 2 years after my mother had died. And I was so sorry that I missed having all those conversations with her. And, they really wrote a beautiful article. Anyway, for Mother's Day, I sent that out to the two sisters and my daughter. And the sister, the 12-year plus 12, came back and said, "Oh, what a lovely story." And she said, "That was 20 years ago. It's too bad Mom hadn't seen this. She would have been so proud." Well, for her to say that was a big, big, big deal. So I guess my only piece of advice is just keep your head above water. Try not to be, there were so many times when I could have shot back at her with some negative comment, but all that does is invite more negativity from her. So you just kind of have to suck it up and remain calm and carry on.
Yeah, oh, I love that so much. And thank you for sharing that so openly as well, because that's something that I hear all the time, and I've had my own share of family dynamics as
Yeah,
well. And I think that, you hit the nail on the head there where you said about, you've got to be open and not push back. I think
right.
that that's something, and it's so hard, isn't it? Especially when you've probably had an element of masculine energy in you to want to be a leader to some extent, right? We all
Yeah,
need a little bit here and there, and to want to just tell her to shut up. But I think that
right,
just holding your own in all of that, and then she
right.
came to you because you didn't have to prove anything to her. I think that's just really wonderful, and I hope that anyone listening that's going for a difficult family time is listening to your story and thinking, yeah, actually, do you know what? Peace can be found. And I think maybe just that sort of deep knowing in your heart that that would be eventually possible, or something like that was maybe subconsciously
Hopeful,
playing out.
yes.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that that's really the key again, where we own our power a bit and we say, you know what? At some point she'll come round, or some point there'll be harmony. And I'm really happy for you that you were able to receive that, because that's such a again, some people could repel that,
Right.
and not want to make a build a bond. But the fact that you were so open to be like, yeah, that's it. And I think as well, like, we all do the best we can with what we know, right? And I guess over time she's evolved and
She
watched you
has.
grow, and
But
actually,
I knew she hadn't seen this article, and I knew I was taking a risk by sharing it with her. And I think my other point is always, not always, it won't always happen, but be conscious, be an observer to your own behavior. Like
mm,
be that third party that's watching you and how what you're doing and what the response is. So you're being your own advocate, but at the same time, you're being your own observer and your own coach. And when things work well, I mean, certainly that increased my level of confidence that day when I get that nice email back from her. And you say to yourself, well, good for you. Good thing you did that. On the other hand, it could have been really, really negative, and you would have had to deal with that. So,
yeah.
you know,
Absolutely. And I've actually had a similar situation happen myself with my own family where, just from past trauma, things come up to the surface again. And I had to really process how I felt about the situation and find that closure and forgiveness myself first. And then the universe kind of presented me the time to actually have that conversation. And again, I didn't know how it was going to go, but I knew that from a space of vulnerability and openness and the hopefulness of harmony,
correct. Right,
that I knew that I was going in open hearted, and whatever they would respond wouldn't matter, because at the end of the day, I've made peace with it. But
right.
luckily, I was rewarded with harmony on the other side. And I think that
Amazing.
it takes bravery, doesn't it, to do
It
that? Like,
does.
again, like, how you sent the article, not knowing what the reaction was going to be.
Mhm.
But, I think that when you have genuine love and compassion and honesty in your heart, there's no way that you can't be met with that. And if you are not met with that, again, it's an opportunity to learn. And I know that's uncomfortable and everyone hates to hear it, but in my life, it's the truth. And that's how
Correct.
resilience built. And that's a story that I tell now, in lots of
Yep.
situations in my life. So, yeah, thank you again for sharing that story, because I think it's so important and so prevalent, I think, for so many people. So,
Oh, for sure.
yeah.
For
Um,
sure.
so with the work that you do now, Nancy, how do people work with you? Like, what's your offers that you have right now?
Well, Women Worth and Wellness is 31 years old. And so this pod pitch experience is brand new. And it's been really, really positive. So now I've said to the group, they're in New York, I need some time out because I got to figure out what I'm going to do with this. Because an area that I was moving towards is the whole business of philanthropy and legacy planning. It's what the evolution has occurred because women are earning a whole lot more, so they're stewarding that wealth. But more importantly, they're inheriting more and with more to come. And
Mm,
so that in itself is a huge opportunity. So one of the areas that I've been thinking about focusing on is women's age of integrity. And the age of integrity is very simply, I can't believe I've lived this long. I can't believe I've done this well. What else would I like to do to give back to work to make a better world? So I've been thinking about that. I just did an event, if you can imagine, on menopause. And the reason why I did it was because I realized that women in their prime leadership trajectory is when menopause symptoms kick in and can be debilitating. And so I thought, I'm going to take this on. Well, of course, coming out of that, this financial planning group approached me and said, could you be a guest speaker? I said, oh my goodness. So the audience will be primarily men. It's a wealth advisory group. And so I said, how much time do I have? He said, 50 minutes, 50. I said, oh my. He said, I had done a presentation to the same group 2 years ago on women's transformational philanthropy. Like they're the new powerful philanthropy. He said, Nancy, you'll be just fine. So I'm not a medical person, but I know the importance of these, of the audience having a greater appreciation. I'll give you an example. When you're a wealth advisor, you do investments and insurance. When somebody applies for insurance, you want them to get the best rate for their health. But sometimes it comes back being rated, meaning you're going to have to pay more for that insurance because we've seen something in your health scenario. Well, what could come back is somebody saying, this looks like an early sign of dementia. Well, you know what? It could be brain fog. This could be something pertaining to menopause. And so this is the kind of awareness that I want this audience to think twice about. And, certainly all the cultural differences, every woman in the entire world, if they live that long, will go through it. I mean, really, once you get into the topic, it is amazing, everything that's going on. And I'm starting off by saying, don't think for a minute this doesn't include you guys, because that's why they call it menopause.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. And I've actually had a menopause expert early on when I started the podcast, and we've spoken a lot about this. So I'm very aware of that. I'm not quite there yet, but I've seen the impact it's had on the women in my life. So I know the importance of it completely. So yeah, I love all of that. And I love that you're educating men on it too, because it's just so important. Everyone, like you said, needs to be connected to that. So if anyone is listening right now and they've loved listening to your story and they want to hear more, do you have a website that we can find you on social media platforms?
All of the above. That's
amazing.
womenworthwellness.com, womenworthwellness.com. And my email is nancy@womenworthwellness.com. And, there's a YouTube www there that shows a lot of the events that we've done on all sorts of different topics. And so there's several ways they can get in touch with us.
Amazing.
And we're on social media with all the different channels. Not TikTok. Yeah. We don't have TikTok.
No problem. Well, what I'll do is I'll get the links from you, obviously, before we upload. Perfect. And then people can click on in the descriptions. It'll be live now on there for anyone to find you, Nancy.
Sounds like a plan.
A little closing tradition that I have is called a soul to soul message. So based on the conversation we've had, or whatever's in your heart right now that you feel like you want to share with the listeners, the stage is yours.
My parting comment would be, your life is a gift. It really is a gift. And it's a blessing that you're able to, do all the things that you can do and really just make the most of it. I will never be negative and say, don't waste it. I'll just say, make the most of it. And one of the best ways you can do that is to stay healthy. We know there are lots and lots of people in the world that are not as blessed as we are. So treating your life as a gift is so important.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for joining me, Nancy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
If this episode resonated with you, please do like, share, and send to someone you know that would benefit. If what I've said in this episode resonates with you, please don't hesitate to drop me a message so we can begin your journey of self-empowerment through self-discovery. My process is simple. Understand what happened to you so you can accept it. From there, you can release what no longer serves you, and then we begin to rebuild your self-worth, your self-esteem, and your self-trust to ultimately ensure that you become the version of yourself that you were destined to be. Time to give yourself the permission to shine.